Hey, I want to welcome you to my study today. My name is Frank Cox. I'm the pastor at North Metro Baptist Church in Lawrenceville, Georgia. As you can tell, I run with champions, but I want to tell you about a true champion. You know, a true champion is one that gets hit with adversity. And what makes them a champion is not that they get hit with adversity, but they get back up and they say, how can I be used in a greater way? I want to tell you a quick story about my friend Jay Gardner. Jay Gardner and his wife was members of my church years ago. Young couple raising two small kids, everything was going their way. God put his hand upon Jay's life and called him to ministry. And then Jay spent the next 20 years in prison. Man, I tell you what, you would think his life was over. But during that 20 years, God got a hold of his life in a tremendous way. And he turned him from a chump to a champion. And God was going to use Jay in a powerful way. Sometimes God carries us in some funny ways as he calls us out and empowers us for ministry. Let me tell you about Jay. One night, God got a hold of his life in that jail cell. And you know what happened? That God began to break his spirit, break his heart, and break him down to say, hey, your life is all torn apart. And out of that night came a ministry by the name of just Torn Pages. I hold in my hand an example of his ministry. I want you to know I've seen this work. It's one of the greatest evangelism tools you could ever see. We were sitting at a restaurant. We had these bracelets laid out. A waitress comes up and says, boy, I like the bracelet. Jay immediately turns to her and says, what do you think they're made out of? And she looked and she gave a couple of guesses, and then Jay just quickly moved into Torn Pages, about the torn pages of your life. Every one of us experienced adversity. We all have torn lives. And then he goes into this thing where he talks about that you can find truth, peace, love, the acceptance that only comes through Jesus Christ. And he stands there and witnesses to that waitress. Here's what's really interesting. Another waitress walks by and says, boy, I like those bracelets. And immediately we're engaged again in a soul-winning experience. So I got one of those bracelets and I put it on. Next day I go to my car dealer and I'm standing there signing a bill for repair. And the lady says, boy, I like that bracelet. So I just do what Jay does. I said, do you know what it's made out of? She guessed. And the next thing I knew, I had 5 to 6 employees at that car dealership standing around looking at the bracelet, and I had the opportunity to share Christ.
The vision of Torn Pages came from a prison cell. My life was torn, ripped apart, and I didn't know what I had. But God touched my life with Torn Pages. It's a reflection of the pages that have been torn, ripped in our lives. But God said, I could take the torn page of your life, son, and create something beautiful and give you a hope and a peace and the strength of on life's journey.
Dear Jay, my name is Jimmy. I've spent the last few years of my life struggling with feelings of hopelessness in the midst of a very difficult battle. I was beaten down and struggling with feelings of pain and guilt. I felt like I wasn't a good father to my autistic son. I felt like I was failing at being a dad. These feelings pushed me towards using drugs and alcohol to escape my emotions. Today, thanks to the message of hope, peace, and strength from Torn Pages, I am in a new life chapter. I know God's got me. I don't need to despair because the shackles of addiction have fallen off by the grace of God. I hang my torn pages in the rearview mirror of my truck so that as I drive, I'm reminded of the hope I have in Jesus. Thanks, Torn Pages.
I received a necklace as a birthday gift and fell in love with a beautiful story. My Sunday school class took a trip to Jerusalem and used Torn Pages as a fundraiser. Little did we know just how deep the impact would go. While we were there, our Jewish guide noticed our necklaces and bracelets we were wearing. I took it off and shared your story, Jay. The guide's eyes welled with tears and he thanked us for the gift. I experienced a miracle that day. God took a necklace from a prison cell all the way to the foothills of Jerusalem. This gift from God is touching lives globally. Thank you, Jay.
This is your friend Carol, writing to tell you the story of Torn Pages impacting my students. I'm a 6th grade teacher and I see the struggles my students face every day. They feel lost and alone, many of them dealing with very hard home lives. I shared my Torn Pages jewelry with my class and your story of hope, peace, and strength. They were so impacted that after class, several students approached me to share their sorrows and struggles with me privately. Later that week, the hallways were full of color. The children were adorned with bracelets, anklets, and necklaces, and sharing the story of Torn Pages with each other. It was amazing. Thank you, Jay, for sharing your story with the world. You are impacting the lives of young people through the peace found in Torn Pages.
Dear Jay, my name is Diane. I lost a loved one to a long and terrible fight with cancer. I know firsthand the financial strain that medical bills place on families with sick loved ones. I wanted to let you know that I am now using my Torn Pages necklaces as a fundraiser to raise strength for other families in their battles with illness. God is touching lives with every purchase made. Thank you so much, Jay. Torn Pages is a beacon of hope in my life and the lives of many others.
This is a beginning of a movement. It is the easiest way to engage people in sharing their faith. I hope that you'll have the opportunity to meet Jay Gardner. I hope that you have the opportunity to hear his story and let God use his story to change your life and your story. It is a great story. It's the greatest story that's ever been told. The grace of God upon someone who's faced adversity. You'll love hearing Jay's story.
As I sat in that prison cell, my life was torn, ripped apart. But God touched my life. And the vision He gave me was that there were so many that have torn pages in their lives, and they need to experience God's hope, peace, and strength. If man can make something beautiful out of torn, written pieces of paper, just think what God can do with the torn pages that are torn, ripped in your life.